Ethan Carter checked his boarding pass for the third time as he held his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, by the hand. It was her first time flying, and she could barely contain her excitement. After months of saving and using reward points he had earned from years of business travel before leaving his old career, Ethan had managed to book 2 first-class seats for a special father-daughter trip. Ever since Chloe lost her mother, Ethan had promised that every birthday would include one unforgettable memory. This year, he had chosen a trip to see the ocean because Chloe had once whispered that she wanted to hear waves in real life instead of through videos. When they boarded the aircraft, Ethan smiled politely at the flight attendant and helped Chloe settle into her wide window seat. She stared out at the runway with shining eyes, clutching the small stuffed rabbit her mother had given her before she passed away. A few minutes later, a sharply dressed executive entered the cabin with 2 assistants. He glanced at Ethan's worn jacket and Chloe's inexpensive backpack before calling a flight attendant over. "There must be some mistake," he said loudly. "Those seats are supposed to be first class." The flight attendant checked Ethan's boarding passes. "They are assigned to these seats, sir." The executive frowned. "I paid full fare. They obviously don't belong here." Several nearby passengers looked over uncomfortably. Trying to avoid creating a scene, Ethan calmly handed over his boarding passes again. They clearly showed 2 confirmed first-class tickets. Despite that, another airline supervisor was called to the aircraft. After several minutes of whispered discussion, the supervisor turned toward Ethan. "Sir, would you mind stepping off the aircraft while we verify something?" Chloe looked up nervously. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Ethan forced a reassuring smile. "No, sweetheart." He quietly gathered their bags and walked off the plane with his daughter, even though he knew his tickets were valid. Passengers watched silently as the single father and little girl disappeared through the cabin door. Back at the gate, Chloe tried not to cry. "I really liked my window." Ethan knelt beside her. "We'll figure it out." Just then, the cockpit door opened. The pilot stepped out after hearing about the delay. He listened carefully as a crew member explained why the departure had been interrupted. The pilot's expression changed immediately. Without saying another word, he looked across the gate, locked eyes with Ethan, and suddenly smiled in complete disbelief. "Captain Carter." The entire gate fell silent. The pilot walked straight past the airline supervisor, stopped in front of the single dad, and raised his hand in a crisp salute. Nobody there understood why one of the airline's most respected pilots had just saluted the passenger they had asked to leave the aircraft. The gate area fell completely silent. Passengers stared in confusion as the pilot held his salute. Ethan looked surprised for only a moment before returning it with a respectful nod. "It's been a long time, Daniel," he said. The pilot smiled. "Yes, sir." The airline supervisor blinked. "You know each other?" Captain Daniel Ross turned toward him. "Know each other?" He looked back at Ethan. "This man was my flight commander in the Air Force." A murmur spread through the waiting area. Daniel continued. "When I was a young officer, Captain Carter taught me that leadership meant taking care of people before yourself." He smiled. "I wouldn't be sitting in that cockpit today without him." The supervisor's face turned pale. He suddenly realized the passenger he had asked to leave the aircraft had done nothing wrong. Daniel asked calmly, "May I see their boarding passes?" The supervisor handed them over. Daniel examined them carefully. "They are valid." He looked up. "So why were they removed?" Nobody answered. Finally, a flight attendant admitted that the complaint from another first-class passenger had influenced the decision. Daniel's expression became serious. "So they were treated differently because of how they looked." Silence. Little Chloe squeezed her father's hand. She still didn't understand why everyone was staring. Daniel knelt to her level. "Is this your first flight?" She nodded shyly. "I was excited about the window seat." Daniel smiled warmly. "I think we can fix that." He stood and addressed the supervisor. "They'll be returning to their original seats." Then he added firmly. And will be departing only after they are comfortably settled. Several passengers applauded. The executive who had started the complaint looked away, clearly embarrassed. Back on board, Ethan and Chloe returned to their seats. As Chloe climbed into her window seat again, her smile returned. She pressed her face against the window. "Daddy, the airplanes look so tiny from here." Ethan laughed softly. "They'll look even smaller once we're in the sky." A few minutes later, Captain Ross made his welcome announcement. Before discussing the flight, he added one unexpected sentence. "Today I'd like to thank a former mentor traveling with us, whose example of integrity shaped my career. It's an honor to have him aboard." The cabin filled with applause. Ethan lowered his head, slightly embarrassed by the attention. Chloe looked up proudly. "My dad's a hero." When the plane landed safely a few hours later, the airline's regional manager was waiting at the gate. After reviewing what had happened, the airline apologized to Ethan and Chloe for the way they had been treated. The manager explained that the incident would be investigated and that additional staff training would be provided to reinforce fair and respectful treatment of all passengers. Ethan accepted the apology with grace. As he and Chloe walked through the terminal, she slipped her small hand into his. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart. Captain Ross wasn't your student because you were rich or famous." Ethan smiled. "No." "Then why?" He looked down at her. "Because sometimes the greatest thing you can give another person isn't money." "What is it?" "Believing in them." Chloe thought about that all the way to baggage claim. Years later, she would remember very little about the flight itself. She wouldn't remember the meal. Or the seat. Or even the destination. But she would always remember the day she learned that a person's true first class isn't printed on a boarding pass. It's reflected in the way they treat others, especially when no one is watching.